I would invite Dr. Sushumna Kannan. She is in USA. This is very late in night for her, but she chose this time slot to speak. Dr. Sushumna Kannan will now speak on is there Brahmanical patriarchy in the depiction of Brahmin or women in Mahabharata. Over to you.
Thank you, Nagraj sir. Thank you so much. I have some slides here and I'd like to share them with you. These slides are not necessarily for the audience to read, but more for me to speak from. So please don't be upset if you can't read everything. Sir, can you see the slides?
Yes, Sushumna, please go ahead.
Okay. The question I want to raise today is whether the Mahabharata reflects the Brahminical patriarchy. I just want to begin by saying that post the ideological theorization of Brahmanas as being on the top of the hierarchy of the caste system, as having more power, better rank and status than others in Indian society, and especially after Louis Dumont's suspicion of Brahmins and his anti-Brahmanical stance in the Homo Hierarchicus, wherein he dismisses Brahmanas on several occasions, ignoring what his own ethnography yielded. Social scientists in India have continued to propose new concepts based on such understandings of Brahminhood, which is that Brahmins are at the top of the hierarchy, they have more power, they oppress others, they have better rank than others, and better status, and so on. One such concept is Brahmanical patriarchy. This concept was proposed by Professor Uma Chakravarti in an EPW article in 1993, and since then has been widely used to talk about both gender and caste in India. What I want to do in this talk is first give you a quick understanding of what she's doing in the essay, Dr. Chakravarti, and her understanding of the concept of Brahminical patriarchy and trace its schemes and pitfalls, and then contrast it with what I found in the Anushasana Parva of the Mahabharata, especially the Dana Dharma Parva and the Uma Maheshwara Samvada. And then we see if the discourse in Mahabharata on Brahminhood is even taken into account in any manner, or whether colonialism's impact and changes in the 19th century are even fully understood by Uma Chakravarti. Is there a critical engagement in her work, particularly this essay? I want to focus only on this essay. With ideological enterprises, or is there an uncritical acceptance of ideological enterprises? My argument is that the Mahabharata does not reflect Brahminical patriarchy. Instead, it presents a clear and critical discourse about who Brahmins are, when and why they should be honored, when they should not be honored, how to become a Brahmin, and how important is birth in attaining Brahminhood. So basically, my argument is that Brahminical patriarchy and Hindu thought are diverging from each other. Now, let's look at Chakravarti's essay. In her essay, her aim is to look at the structural framework of gender relations, that is, the nature and basis of the subordination of women and its extent and specific form in early Indian society. So she's already made up her mind that we are all subordinated in ancient India, early Indian society as well. Caste and gender hierarchy, according to her, are the organizing principles of the Brahmin social order, and despite their close interconnections, scholars haven't studied them. So she begins and claims that gender oppression and caste oppression are related, caste purity and women's purity are also related. Her main argument in this essay is that there is a control of women's sexuality. Why? Because patrilineal succession had to be ensured. So this is a very typical Marxist analysis. But what goes unexplained? I think what goes unexplained is matrilineal, a practice like niyoga, because if sexuality had to be controlled, then why would you even allow for a practice like niyoga? Non-bloodline lineage formations that did not involve women always, like for instance, gurus and shishyas, or sons born to a father, but were not sons in relationship. And then sons who didn't grow up with the father were sometimes not considered sons. So if patrilineal succession was so important, then how were these other kinds of relationships also allowed? I also want to ask how the Bija Kshetra Nyaya, which is the root of why women's sexuality was thought to be an important thing that had to be kept pure, is proposed in the Indian tradition, wherein both Bija and Kshetra are considered very important. So why propose this theory at all if patrilineal succession was all there was to all of this? And then she does mention that mother goddess traditions do mean that women as nurturers were valued, but then she doesn't take it up further. So that's another thing. And then she doesn't look at bhakti traditions or any other tradition that overlooks caste and purity. And so these are things that she does not address in this essay. So for her, patrilineal succession is the reason why women's sexuality had to be controlled. But like I said, she doesn't talk about matrilineal. So I'm going to skip this slide. Patrilineal succession for Chakravarti is an ideology of the upper castes. This, to me, is like saying nothing because Shraddha rules are hectic for Brahmins and lax for other jatis. That is the case even to this day. So the traditional understanding of why women's sexuality had to be controlled was because of the performance of Shraddha and related such other understandings of other worlds, the Pitras, who they receive arghyas from and who they refuse arghyas from, and so on. And I agree that women were guarded, but this was for the protection of lineage and Shraddha rules. An adulterous wife's food would not be received by the Pitrus. We have evidence for this in our text, and it's pretty consistent. So the original cluster of concepts that served as a framework for Varna and gender relationships was mostly to do with Shraddha. And then another set of concepts would be Varna Sankara, Pratiloma, Kula, Pitris, and so on. So Chakravarti mentions these concepts, Varna Sankara, Pratiloma, and so on, and connects them as devices coined to maintain power over women and lower castes. Whereas we can come up with alternative interpretations for both these and several other objections that she raises. Pratiloma marriages, for instance, is a case where the upper caste woman marries the lower caste person, and this was not favorably looked upon by the tradition because the karma between the couple, the husband and wife, would be shared, and the woman would then lose access to her punya, as it were. The same would not happen in the other case where a lower caste person would marry a high caste man because there because his punyas would be sorry, I had an argument for this. I can't remember it now. I'll skip it. If someone wants to know more about this, please ask me. By that time, I might remember this. I have it worked out somewhere, but it's not coming to me right now. So for all the condemnation of Varna Shankara and Pratiloma marriages, both are mentioned by Manu as facts, as simple facts, and that they lead to newer jatis is something that Manu just mentions casually, and so does several other texts like Mahabharata and so on, and several other Puranas. So far, all Chakravarti has said is that power and wealth were the only driving factors of Hindu society. This is just a Marxist analysis and has lost its explanatory power for explaining India's past and present, if you want to think about it carefully. And we have seen that preservation of the purity of lineages hailing from Brahma, as recounted in numerous Puranas, mattered because of the whole cluster of concepts like Shraddha, Arghya, Pitris, and so on. And Chakravarti then mentions a verse from the Gita that mourns Varna Sankara, but fails to mention traditions. Oh, yeah, I covered this point, so I'm going to skip that. So basically, her argument is that all the detailing of norms for women are a powerful admission of the power of non-conforming women, which means that those women who don't conform have extraordinary power, and it is this power that is feared in Hindu society. So basically, fear of female sexuality. So again, I'd like to remind here that women who break away merely form new jatis. This is what has been happening. So there is no power to be gained for women or for men when they break away. In fact, they lose a lot of their connections, the support system they had, and so on. So, and that's true even to this day in love marriages. So there is no power in breaking away like Chakravarti thinks there is. So Chakravarti mentions prehistoric paintings and so on, and recognizes the nurturing mothering roles that are there. But these are there almost till today. The role of women as mothers is exalted, but she doesn't consider this aspect at all, but sticks with many derogatory statements made about women. They are read as derogatory, of course. They can be read differently. And begins from the Vedic period and looks at dasis. She has an essay on the Vedic dasi. And she looks upon servants here as slaves. And although that is not necessarily how all scholars understand it, there is no scholarly consensus on this except in leftist circles. But in the Anushasana Parva, which I was just reading yesterday, I found the mention of Arundhati's female servant who happily serves virtuous Brahmanas. So even as far as the Mahabharata, we see instances where the dasis are happy to be serving virtuous Brahmanas. Now, this is a puzzle that she obviously does not address. And then she views Niyoga also as a utilization of the reproductive potential of women. So every instance of the control of women's sexuality is interpreted as an aspect of labor production, power, and control. Whereas in Hindu thought, self-control was prescribed for both men and women in several areas of life, but especially sensual experiences. And generally, this could be termed as brahmacharya. Also, both men and women are often seen as embodiments of untruth. This is because they are being compared to the truths that gods embody. In the rest of the essay, Chakravarti lists all the negative statements, ignoring the hyperbolic nature of some of these statements, the alternatives offered when Varna rules were broken, as well as the general disdain with which sannyasi traditions, especially Buddhist, tend to describe women. She ignores all of this and ends up with whatever is otherworldly experience becomes a pursuit of power, whatever is hyperbolic becomes literal, whatever is religious becomes secular, whatever is ethical in India's past now becomes unethical. So many of her examples come from Buddhist literature, but she does not see any contradiction in the fact that Buddhism took a different stance on Varnashrama scheme. So Chakravarti relies overly on Gerda Lerner's book, The Creation of Patriarchy, to formulate her frame, which is not a book on India. And once the frame is in place, everything seen is viewed as Brahminical patriarchy. So this kind of Marxist secular feminist history has no regard for ethics of the past or the culture of the present. Some of us are all too familiar with this kind of narrative. To challenge the validity of the concept of Brahminical patriarchy, one would ideally take the path of analyzing women in Hinduism, or at least in Mahabharata, but and then provide alternative explanations for all the negative statements that she has listed about women. But that's not what I'm going to be doing today. Although I think I have done it a little bit already. For lack of time and in keeping with the theme of the conference, I would like to contend Uma Chakravarti's concept of Brahminical patriarchy by taking up discussions of Brahminhood in the Anushasana Parva. Now, any number of texts discuss Brahminhood, but the Mahabharata is a particularly rich resource, and it has some very elaborate discussions on the topic, which make it a very ideal text to take up. By providing a contrast to Chakravarti's understanding of Brahminism, I would like to cast doubts on the value of her concept. What we must remember here is that a concept like Brahminical patriarchy is something that is developed by scholars in order to explain phenomena. They are not etched in stone just because they are published somewhere and so on. They may or may not be useful, and we can reject them if we find that they don't explain the phenomena under question. So just because it has gained ground in the scholarly community does not mean that it must go unchallenged. So basically what I'm trying to do to contend Brahminical patriarchy is to look at Brahmana, the word and its reference. I'm not looking at unbound women, matrilineal women, powerful women. That's for another day. So the sharp contrasting discussions on who is a Brahmana, how should he be, and so on from the Mahabharata are extremely interesting. We find a very complex understanding of Brahminhood here that Chakravarti does not allow anywhere in this essay. In the Mahabharata, there are several sections that throw light on who is a Brahmana and especially who is a true Brahmana. My attempt here is to define the field of reference around the word Brahmana before it changed to acquire negative connotations. By doing this, I'm showing that Chakravarti has omitted, excluded, and ignored many aspects of the tradition and has not even considered these aspects as data. The ethics or the fabric of society before colonialism has been completely ignored, and the distorted remnant is being criticized. So, in the Anushasana Parva alone, the word Brahmana or Brahmanas are mentioned about 1,000 times. I tracked every single usage over 500 pages of Vivek Debroy's translation, and I categorized them into some information about Brahminhood. So one of the first aspects of discussion is who is a Brahmana. Very quickly, those who offer oblations into the Agnihotra fire morning and evening, they are rigid in their vows, they are pure, self-controlled, satisfied with their own wives, knowers of dharma, possess subtle insight, study quietly, are austere, do not depend on anyone else, always fasting, pleasing the guru, immersed in dharma, seeking alms, always following brahmacharya and studying, living in a clean house. Brahmanas are mild in character, they are truthful in conduct and protect true dharma. They are a friend to everyone and were created to save the world. When they are enraged, they can behave like venomous serpents. If they are dishonored, they abandon kings. And Bhishma declares that he loves Brahmanas more than he loves his family. A Brahmana's fortitude lies in not asking for riches, and a Brahmana has fortitude even in misery. Between two Brahmanas who are equally pure and learned, one must give to those who is not asking. Brahmanas can consume the earth through the fire of their austerities. They have spiritual powers, and they think it is their duty to receive gifts that have been purified with devotion. If a Brahmana has committed sinful deeds, he must go to a hermitage and free himself from all attachments and desires. Some more on this. I have a couple more slides. Please bear with me. Brahmanas always praise a person who gives land to righteous people. They are virtuous, self-controlled, pleasant in speech towards all human beings. They will not perform a perverse deed out of a fear. They have sons and wives who are equal to them in conduct. A Brahmana is like fire. This fire is evident in an ascetic Brahmana. If a brahmachari is enraged, even Indra is terrified. They are performers of auspicious deeds, learned in the Vedas. They follow vows, must bathe, and yes, there is the story of King Nriga who once could not settle an issue of a Brahmin's cow and ended up becoming a giant lizard and stayed that way for 1,000 years until Krishna came and gave him mukti. So there are many such stories that Bhishma narrates. And the Brahmanas worship the sun and moon and always speak of auspicious accounts. A Brahmana is a person who is engaged in his own tasks. Therefore, he does neither good nor evil. He treats his friends and enemies equally. He is forgiving, self-restrained, and does not injure others. He knows all the 6 Vedangas and many other scriptures. He works towards ensuring the pleasure of all beings. He's always immersed in Atman. He's free of opposite sentiments. He is knowledgeable. He must always behave like a sage, desire dharma, is self-restrained, and by eating the food, they save the world from fear. So basically, Brahmanas, by eating the food that is offered, they take away the sins of others, and this is how they purify others. A Brahmana is always truthful in speech. He'll never eat meat. So very quickly, I found references to Brahmanas in a different kind of way as well. The words that I saw, like Brahmachari, Agnihotri, Vaikhanasas, Guru, Rajaguru, Chakrachara, Brahmins, and so on and so forth, seem to yield to a ashrama classification. So a Brahmana in various ashramas seem to acquire a certain kind of referent word. When he's a young child, he's a brahmachari. As a grihastha, he's an agnihotri or a teacher, and so on. So this was one thing. And then there is a lot of discussion about who is not a brahmana. So he who is polluted, he who does not follow all the rules that I mentioned in the earlier 3 slides, who is of loose conduct, careless character, thief, who eats anything that's given to him, and so on. So a Brahmana who doesn't study is also not a Brahmana. So, and then there is a long list. Please bear with me. So a Brahmana born from an inferior lineage should be barred from places where oblations are being offered. So there are strict rules on not allowing such a person into a place where sacrifices are being conducted. So it is better that a man cheerfully feed a single Brahmana who knows the mantras than feed 1,000 Brahmanas who don't know the mantras. So there is a very clear understanding of who is a Brahmana and what should not be done as well. So if a Brahmana who has studied the 4 Vedas is overcome by confusion and accepts a gift from an outcast, he's reborn as a mule. So there are various such statements that show that there are punishments for Brahmanas who transgress there. So the niyamas are really, really rigid, and Brahmins were supposed to follow these. So those who do not practice the Gayatri for 3 generations are often said to cease to be Brahmanas. And there is the notion of the Brahmana Bandhu. In the Bhagavata, Vyasa says that he wrote the Mahabharata for such people, for Brahmana Bandhus who have lost touch with their roots and lineages. So there are a lot of injunctions on giving to Brahmana. But what I found especially interesting is that there is always a predicate to this sentence, which says to receive. So why should you give to a Brahmana? To relieve yourself from your sins. And when we give to the Brahmanas, we obtain their merits. Therefore, we must give to them. So the transaction is never one-sided. So the Brahmana is not a person who has power that is unquestioned, that is power that stays with him forever, and so on. He has to keep on re-energizing himself, if you like, because he gives away. And that generosity is another qualification of a Brahmana. If he doesn't have that, then he's not a Brahmana. So without giving to Brahmanas, you will not enjoy prosperity, says Bhishma to Yudhishthira. Without resorting to Brahmanas, what is the purpose of us remaining alive? This is the way eternal dharma has to be followed, he says. So it is said that the fruits obtained from giving to Brahmanas who are learned in Vedas and following vows are equal. So just giving to Brahmanas is an easier way out for many people out there. If a Brahmana brahmachari eats food at your house in the morning, 3 sacrificial fires are satisfied. So in this way, a king who gives earth to Brahmana obtains it back. So in this way, everything that is given is said to come back. If you follow the rites and give food to Brahmanas in the proper way, then you will obtain heaven. If a person donates food to an accomplished Brahmana who asks for it, then the donor ensures best riches for himself. If a man gives Brahmana wood for the purposes of heating, he's always successful in his efforts. If a person is controlled and donates footwear to Brahmanas, he is able to overcome all thorns and difficulties. He is always placed above his enemies. If a person gives sesame seeds to Brahmanas, then they do not have to go to hell. In this way, a person who donates a bull to Brahmana possesses qualities and obtains greatness in heaven. A learned Brahmana who is in control of his senses, if he is given a house and resides there happily, then the giver obtains the best of worlds. Desiring the fruits, all Varnas must donate according to their capacities. So desiring the fruits and you can, this is legitimate, you can have this desire and then give to the Brahmana. So you're getting back your value. So through his own deeds, a Kshatriya must donate earth to the Brahmanas and they must receive it, and Brahmanas must receive it. So a person who donates cows also yields benefits. Brahmana wives who are waiting for their husbands must be fed, and so on. So many such rules. I don't want to go into all of them, but in every sentence I saw an if. When to give. A Brahmana is held accountable and his conduct is observed. This is what I saw. If he's studying and devoted to the Vedas and Vedantas and knows the rituals, then give. If he's virtuous, attentive towards guests and mild, then give. If he is pleasant in speech towards everyone, if he is hungry, lacking in means of subsistence, if he is an Agnihotri who knows the Vedas, then give. So observable conduct was an important criteria. So there's a lot of praise for Brahmins, but again, everywhere there is the praise for Brahmin is tied to his duties and to conduct. So this is not birth-based. Again, this is what I want to emphasize here. So he must have knowledge, he must be dharmic, and not respecting Brahmanas makes the god suffer because the sacrifices suffer. So because they have all kinds of knowledge and can be a source of purification, the Brahmanas have to be revered. So there is a long list of sins accrued when Brahmanas are harmed. I don't want to go into this. But the question of whether Brahmanahood is by birth or conduct is an important question that the text asks through its many characters several times. So a Brahmana is both self-controlled and born in noble lineages. So it appears that both birth and conduct are important. Because of wicked deeds, a Brahmana can be dislodged. So that means conduct is important, birth alone cannot serve him. Determined by birth, Brahminhood is determined by birth because of the samskaras conducted in childhood, in early childhood, despite which if one becomes violent and doesn't follow the rules, he is no longer a Brahmana. And then one must donate a cow only after ascertaining the nature of the Brahmana. This is something that Bhishma repeatedly tells Yudhishthira: observe the Brahmana, ascertain his nature, and then give. And then there are several other statements of the following nature. When an ignorant Brahmana eats, he destroys the food that he eats, and so on. So there is a strong condemnation of someone who is not a Brahmana, but is taking things that belongs to the Brahmanas. So Brahminhood, if you like, is not a right earned by birth or an assertion of power, I would say, but a duty dependent on conduct. To the question how to become a Brahmana, these are the answers given: serving Brahmanas, dying on a battlefield, performing good deeds, discharging one's own conduct, one's own dharma proudly, and practicing austerities. So until the 18th century, kings would issue jati patras to several communities who had risen in rank by performing charitable activities. So this was a possibility that one could actually change their jatis, rise in rank, and become a Brahmana was an actual reality until recently, and such patras were issued by kings. So in the Uma Maheshwara Samvada, this is an actual question that Parvati asks. How can those who naturally belong to other varnas become Brahmanas? So again, Shiva gives very interesting answers. He says that anyone who follows Brahmana dharma and lives like them can attain Brahminhood. And then he also says that those who are born as Brahmins but don't follow the conduct, they are dislodged from Brahmin birth. And he even says that a Shudra who is pure in his deeds, pure in his soul, has conquered his senses, can obtain the status of a Brahmana. And Brahma himself has said this. It is my view, he says, that a Shudra who is naturally pure in his deeds should be known as one who is purer than a Brahmana. So this is one. And then in the Uma Maheshwara Samvada, there's something interesting happening. The Brahmana is spoken of as if he was an ascetic. So they are used interchangeably in this part of the text. So he is free of all attachments, all bonds of affection, and so on. And his sentiments of merging his own self with his Atman is his priority. He abstains from food. He practices eternal dharma. He does not sleep too much, and he does not stay in the same place for more than one night. This is almost like a sannyasi. And he practices Uncha Vritti, and then there are Chakrachara Brahmins who are wandering always. So my hunch is that this is the Vanaprastha mode where they almost look like sannyasis, the Brahmanas. So in conclusion, what I'd like to say is that the rich discussion of Brahmanahood that is there in Hindu texts is not considered by any of the Marxist feminist historians we see around us. The secular history of India's past is distortive, and one must, I think, say that either do secularism in the present or simply write a religious history of the past and leave it at that. What is the point of taking secularism to the past and crying that there is grave injustice going on? So the Hindu ethical premises remain in culture to the present day, and anyone who disregards it, we must say, has no respect for inclusivity. So this is the problem with Uma Chakravarti's article. At the end of her article, one feels as if the choice of partner is the only choice women have. And by exercising that, and just that, we can show power. It is as if we women can speak back only if we ruin the system of Brahminical patriarchy through independent choice of a partner or by deciding how we choose to practice our sexuality. So fear of female sexuality has become a stock phrase in feminist analyses, and patrilineal succession has gained traction despite the fact that Dharmashastras offer women the right to landed property, movable assets, maintenance, skill-based education, entrepreneurship in matrilineal if she wants to, and protection. Stridhana is what I have in mind. So these are my responses to Uma Chakravarti, and my response comes from a text like Mahabharata. So that's my talk. I'd like to end here. Thank you, Nagaraji.
Thank you, Sushumna ji. As always, it was a very rigorously argued and well-referenced paper. There were a few questions, which one of those was from Professor Dr. Dharmendra Sharma. But that was not actually relevant to the topic of your paper. So I answered it then and there. But for the benefit of the other audience who might not know the question and my answer, I am reading out both the question and answer, though they are not relevant to the talk. The question is, it is said that God Brahma married to his own daughter, Devi Saraswati. Please, will you explain it? I answered this question because I see nowadays that Christian missionaries are using this story in their propaganda a lot, and it is making rounds in YouTube and other social media also. So I thought it is very, very important to answer such questions, so I answered it. I'm reading out my answer. Matsya Purana has a discussion with this question. Manu puts this question to Matsya Narayana. Matsya Narayana's answer is that those narratives do not belong to the human world. They belong to the world of abstract concepts. The words, Sanskrit words used in Matsya Purana is they belong to my Atindriya Srishti, and they should not be taken in their Mukhartha. These two are the Sanskrit words used in the Matsya Purana. So the relationship of father and daughter or husband and wife are analogies for the relationship among the abstract concepts. Purana ends here. But other sources help us, they help us to understand which are these abstract concepts. Meaning comes from sound, and sound and meaning are eternally inseparable. Sound is Brahma, meaning is Saraswati. So that is how meaning Saraswati is the daughter of Brahma, the sound, and meaning Saraswati, which is eternally associated with sound Brahma, are husband and wife. These are abstract conceptual relationships. They are not actual human world stories. Okay. That was the answer. And there was another comment called Wonderful Compilation of Niyamas for Brahmanas by Lalita ji. My answer was, the compilation is part of a larger argument against feminist misrepresentations. So this paper is not meant to compile all Brahmana ideals. The list of ideals was from Mahabharata, particularly from Anushasana Parva only, as a counter argument against a specific Uma Chakravarti's paper using the concept of Brahmanical patriarchy. Sunil Kumar sent this question. Were the Brahmins always a monolithic Varna? Was there any fluidity, as in elevation to Brahminhood as opposed to Varna Sankara? Kaushika Vishwamitra's struggle to become a Brahma Rishi, equivalent to Vashishta, is more of a spiritual moral story. Do we have historical references? Like certain Shudra Varnas were elevated in many kingdoms to Kshatriya equivalent. Is there probably the questioner means whether there is equivalent of that Shudras getting promoted as Brahmins? Yes, the Jati Patras indicate there was upward mobility. It was the answer given by Dr. Sushumna Kannan. As
Jati
a
Patras. Jati Patras.
Jati Patras indicate there was upward mobility was the answer given by Dr. Sushumna Kannan. In support of that, in substantiation of that, as a cultural anthropologist who has done field work in this area for decades, I would like to share some very interesting stories. There is a particular community in Orissa and the borders of Andhra Pradesh that once the reservations were introduced, what happened is the same community with same family name living on the other side of the border inside Orissa was getting reservation, as a scheduled tribe, and the same community with has a relationship, kinship with these people also. But on the other side, on the Andhra Pradesh side, they were not getting reservations. Then they moved the court of law and they went to the commission also, Justice Punnaya Commission, and they claimed that they also, because their relatives on the Orissa side are getting scheduled tribe reservation, they should also get it, uh, and their Brahmin identity is not correct. This story shows you that a scheduled tribe was promoted as a Brahmin, and once reservation system got introduced, they started struggling to go back to their scheduled tribe identity. And the Justice Punaya Commission at that time denied the community scheduled tribe status. It said that you have to remain as Brahmins only. But I know the association members. I'm in touch with them. They are still struggling to get their scheduled tribe status back. This shows that scheduled tribe got promoted as Brahmins. There could be many, many examples all around the country where there is a change of non Brahmin communities, whether tribal communities or jatis, getting promoted as Brahmins. But once the reservation system got introduced, the mobility aspirations started moving downwards. Uh, the earlier mobility aspirations are upwards. The post reservation mobility aspirations are downwards, that are creating all these legal battles. Thank you. So there was a comment by Lakshmi Saripalli. Very much enjoyed your presentation, Dr. Sushumna ji. And there is Rajesh Joshi. Was the term Brahmanical patriarchy used first time in 1993 by Uma Chakravarti in her article, or there earlier mentions as well? Dr. Sushumna Kannan answered, she introduced the term. Uma Chakravarti introduced the term is the answer given by Dr. Sushumna Kannan. So now let us move on in symposium. Thank you again very much, Dr. Sushumna ji. Wonderful paper.